within Babellion Studios just to talk about creative processes and kind of learn from each other, and create some networks and stuff like that. I get to talk from a friend from high school who I am visiting in St. Louis, Missouri. Shouts to Quinn Wai Wong of Washington University. What else do you want the world to know about you?
Well, I'm from Malaysia. I've traveled around a lot. Super extremely lucky to travel around. First was in Malaysia, then was in Houston, Texas for a while, was in Anchorage, Alaska for a while, went back to Malaysia, was in Egypt with Titus, spent 8th grade to high school with him, and now I'm here in St. Louis. So, happy to be here in my own home, and happy to be with Titus.
Yeah, it's been great visiting you and kind of getting you to watch you flourish as a musician and producer. That's been really cool. So, I've seen you work with others, for example. It seems like that's kind of what you want to do, is be a guy who can be of service for other people, other musicians that have a lot of creativity, but they just don't know exactly how to execute it. You seem like a guy who can execute it because of your music theory background. Give us a little idea of the music theory background and also how you think it will apply to producing.
Yeah, so something that I really enjoy is working with people. I think it's something that I don't do as often as I should, because when I have this sort of idea that when you work on a creative project, a lot of it is just taking what your concept of music, what your emotional idea is in the moment, and sort of merging it, intermingling it with something that is greater than you, and that by including other people, I think that's it provides that. Mm-hmm. And so primarily for the past 2.5 years, I've been working on music, and I've just been producing in my bedroom, stuff just been making, plugging in my electric piano, my MIDI keyboard, and playing on that. And then, a lot of the drums I've been doing myself, chords and all these arrangements I've been trying to do myself. Mm-hmm. Something that I'm learning more and more is that, there's so many people, yesterday we just met with Sam, someone that I knew from freshman year and haven't talked to in so long. And I think that with people like that, it just brings so much to the table, because I was sort of sitting in awe as I saw him play for a while, because
guitarist.
Yeah, because he's an acoustic guitarist, and just I watch him just do the strumming and the frets and just work with all of that, and it's so fascinating to me. And it's something that I'm not a guitarist myself, but I love guitar and songs. I'm a big fan of anything from psychedelic rock to indie rock, all the way over to when they use guitar samples and jazz in rap too. So I just think that a lot of my creative process has been okay, how can I have a really strong foundation in things like music theory, things like producing, and just have a very good overarching skill set, so that I can support people when I work with them, and that I can sort of be that all-rounder that can work through a lot of different genres, sort of in the way that crazy people like Pharrell, Rick Rubin, Benny Blanco can all adapt to all sorts of musicians. It's just, I have a great love for music as a whole, and so to be able to create a skill set that sort of matches that. I know Kenny Beats also talks about that as a producer, working with any artist. So yeah, that's why I sort of have the skill set that I have, and I'm trying to work through it.
You also started out very young, learning a lot of music, and kind of you talked about this, as you were growing up, that was something that was your one creative outlet, but you didn't exactly pursue it because you just thought it was you're going to get into other things. Right now you're a comp sci major. You thought maybe you could get into being a doctor at one point. I remember in high school you're talking about that, and engineering. Is this something that you really would like to pursue if given the opportunity, or something you would always just keep on the side?
For me, it's all about the creative outlet, and I think that however much I want to do with it is how much I need or want to express myself at a given point in time. So far, it went from being nothing. I actually, when I was even though I started music younger, doing a little bit of piano when I was in elementary school for a while, and then learning trombone for most of my middle and high school years, it was always just, I think it was even more of a side thing than now I think it's a side project, but it's more of a hobby and a passion, whereas before it was just an interest, if you know what I mean. You know, like from interest to passion, there's like a lot more investment that comes into that, you know, like personal attachment. And so right now I see it as a side thing, but I think it's, like you said, it's the only creative outlet for me because I'm not a creative person. You give me a pencil and paper and tell me to draw something and I'll be at a complete loss. Yeah, so it's really awesome to be able to hear and understand and digest all of the different ways that people express themselves through music. And I think that right now it's like me trying to grow as an artist and find that, you know, my little niche within it, as well as, you know, because even though I do want to be this all-rounder, I also want to have a very strong voice, and that's something that I've also been working on. I was telling you that it's so hard to take an idea that's in your head. It's like, I know this emotion, or I know this, you know, quote or this line that I want to distill into a song, but it's so hard to translate through, okay, how does that work in chords? How does that work in the drums? How are we going to sample different people to sort of bring this all together? And so, yeah, I don't know. It's been a growing process for me, and I think that I'm like continuing to invest more and more into it. It's become like I said, from an interest to a passion. So it's growing and growing. I don't know where it's gonna. I think it's gonna take me as much as I'm gonna take this hobby to as far as it can be. You know.
Of course. What do you think like bridged the gap from interest to passion? Was it genre, artist, or maybe like people around you kind of like showed you new things, or like even taught you new things about music?
Right. I know there a lot of my rap, a lot of the rap that I listen to now, I actually got on because of Mala, one of our high school friends. She introduced me to Chance the Rapper. She introduced me to I think she introduced me to Smino and like No Name, all of these people that I had no idea about. And this like Chicago rap scene became really crucial to, I think, the type of music that I like to make, which is laid back but like very emotional and very versatile.
Right.
And, you know, I think that change happened as I began to listen to music, both in a way that maybe like that you take with film, that you can appreciate a good movie, right? But you can also appreciate like the transitions. You can appreciate the, you know, all these different things that, you know, I can't even name because I that's not my area. But I think music for me, there's so many different things to appreciate.
Right.
For me, as I began producing, I began learning more of that. Take Flume, for example. I think he is just a creative genius, and some people might listen to his music and just absolutely love it, but you know, I think what's crazy is that some of his sounds are just so harsh and so like almost unnatural, but not even in a bad way, just so unique in that how are these sounds even created? And you know, Flume creates like pop records, which is insane to me. Like, you know, Say It by Flume is just a really popular song, and somehow he has so much like depth and creativity, and I think there's no one to this day who can replicate Flume's sound perfectly. He's just in his own world, in the same way that Tyler, you were talking about Tyler, that he's just like he's so creative, and he's just so much his own artist. I think beginning to appreciate and take apart and pull apart these little things, like I don't even know how to recreate his sounds. Crazy. I listen to R&B and I'm like, I don't even know how they swing the drums so crazy, and it's so off time, and you know, bends and sort of melts time that it feels very, you know, very vibey, you know, for lack of a better word. But there's so many different things that the more I see, the less I know how to do, which makes me even more interested to learn more about it. And I think that transition happened as I started making more and more music, which was, you know, end of senior year, more and more as I had winter break, summer break off to just dive into music, things like that, you know, over the course of, I'd say maybe like past 2.5 years was that transition for me.
Yeah, I think what I see from you a lot is a great example of like passive versus active listening, where like when I got to be a film major, I was just a passive viewer of film.
Right.
And then I was taught to be an active viewer and be like, literally have a shot chart and be like, watch each frame and how the camera moves and where it takes you, and wonder why they're doing that, how they're doing that.
Right.
Will it serve a purpose later? Will they go back to the specific camera movement later, and what will that represent? Like all those different things and intricacies that average viewer or the passive viewer is meant not to see, because that's the point. Like, you don't want to have to think about that. You just want to enjoy it. And so what I see from you is like very intent listening. Like when the credits were rolling in the Studio Ghibli movie we were watching, and you're counting the music.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. It's like you have this love for it so much that you want to understand every facet of it. And I think that's very cool. Is that something like you've had to teach yourself, or like make yourself do? Like, even if you start not to enjoy something because of it, like you have to make yourself do it.
Yeah, I mean, there are moments where I fade into being passive viewer, passive listener, active listener, I guess in this case. And I don't know, just to really quickly touch up on that initial thing where you like went frame by frame. There was one time where I think it was the start of a Smino song. It was Ricky Millions, and I heard this electric piano play in the intro, and it was just really sparse. Not sparse, but like it was not a lot of notes were being played, but it was just a very beautiful harmony. Right before, like in the intro, it's unsampled, and it's just the electric piano. You know, it hasn't been remixed and stuff like that into the track.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just heard that, and for maybe like in this 12 seconds that I listened to this, I spent 2 hours on the piano diddling, and my ear isn't very good, isn't really like, I'm still working on trying to hear something that I enjoy and try and like replicate it and put it onto, appreciate it for all of its music theory worth.
Right.
But in those 12 seconds, I could appreciate it for and try and replicate that for an hour and a half, and still listen to that song as I'm going to school, or as I'm commuting and stuff like that. And I think that like sort of essence, I think the active listening comes on. It's more of a thing that when there are parts of the song that, like, as I listen more and more to music and varied types of music, I pick up on things. Like, it's actively, but it's like I can enjoy it for what it's worth. It's like a good balance. And I think that it's not often that I have to really force that, because I think it comes from the appreciation of the base is the appreciation of the music, right? And so once you appreciate the music, you listen in and you hone in. And I think that's something I for one am definitely not the kind of person who's like really good at multitasking. I am very like scatterbrained. If you tell me to do 3 different things, I'll be like, okay, wait, let me just do this one thing, let me do the second thing, let me do the third thing. But with music, like, I hone in very quickly.
Right.
And so that's something that's like really, really powerful to me, like really, really important to me, because the way I digest it is very much appreciation. I think it's like passive listening first, something catches my attention, and I'm like, holy crap, this is insane.
Zoom in.
Right, zoom in, and then it's like boom, 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 and then slowly I'm, maybe just at one sound that, one chord that Smino, that introduces Smino's song, or like one sound that introduces Flume's record, and just all of these things just slowly like coalesce and I think help me develop. So I don't think I think it's slowly becoming more natural as the more you digest, the more you appreciate, the more you get to really, I guess, hone in on the little technical things, or not even technical, but just details that come to life and make the song what it is,
Yeah. Do you think, like, okay, for example, when we were at the guitarist's house yesterday,
right,
and he was kind of like looking for the key, and he was just like playing it and then kind of like counting on the frets, like trying to figure out like where that was, and you just heard it and you're like, that's C. Like that's what key we're in, and he was just like, whoa, you just know that from hearing it. Like, do you think that is something you could have done before, like this intent listening, this phase of like active listening, just from like background on music theory, or is like that's something you had to train yourself for?
Yeah, so that actually was I guess the little part between me saying like that's C and stuff was him fiddling with it, and then I was on the piano like just trying to listen on to, okay, what is that? Because I was unfortunately not blessed with like perfect pitch, and I like think people who have that, like I know some friends, it's amazing because it's such an asset, because they know exactly, if they have a song in mind, they don't even have to think, they don't have to go to the piano to say, okay, let's do, I know this, like they have an idea in their mind, musical idea, and they say, okay, this is going to be an A flat minor. Charlie Puth does that. We were I think he was talking with Benny Blanco, just making like some random song on Instagram Live, and he was like, "What key are we thinking it's supposed to be in?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I think it wants to be in a G sharp or whatever." And I think that's really impressive because it sort of hones in on that. You already know you can translate the sound straight into translate the idea straight into the sound. But something that I have begun to practice is, learning intervals, like learning how to recognize different parts of a song more, or different parts of like chords and melodies more quickly, because I think as I'm more rapidly able to do that, right, like the faster I can work with Sam, the faster I can work with other artists, because that means that there's less lag time between his creative process or his or her creative, whoever it is, creative process and my creative process. It's more of a conversation instead of being a like stilted, we have to cross a bridge to meet each other each time,
Right.
And so I think that like I have had to practice of the music theory that I understand. I have to continue to practice and continue to learn, and not just learn it but apply it and play it on piano, and like repetitively sort of get that into me until it feels natural, because that's I feel, with my background in music theory. For some people it's different, who are self-taught, right? Like they have a different process, but for me it's like I want to distill all of this stuff that I've studied and played, practiced on trombone, stuff like that, and make and facilitate the music and creative process more quickly, because it's all about, in my mind, I think a lot of the best creativity comes when you're flowing as easily as you can, right? Like you said you stayed up so late just to write a whole script, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that I just want to make myself flow as quickly as possible, and that comes with practice for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you start with a song, we kind of like went through this with Sam and also with Mario Time.
Right.
Usually you say you just open up and just play around with sounds, like just toggle each kind of option and feature until you find something that really just kind of grabs your interest, basically.
Right.
Like, oh, let's see what I can do with this.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's very similar to like when I would open up a Photoshop document.
Right.
And I don't think I'm that great with Photoshop, but I've gotten better just because I would open up and just play around with every feature until I knew what they did and how they could be applied. And honestly, sometimes I don't even use them, but still when I do use them, like it's very important to me, because like I wouldn't have done that like had I not just like played around for hours and made something so terrible just because I was just trying to use something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Was that like a learning curve for you too? Like when you first got Logic, or maybe you played around with GarageBand first, like you had to just like play around with everything and just like make something so terrible, but at least you knew what things did.
That's exactly it. You hit it right on the head, because I'm sorting through some of my old projects right now, and I open it up and I'm like, sometimes I don't even want to play. I'm like, I hear the first bar and I'm like, okay, I think this one we'll store these in the archives. I don't know when's the next time I'm gonna open it, but it'll be in the archives. And it was so much because I had this idea in my mind, and it was like, okay, let me just play around with it. For example, something that was really specific that I had trouble with all the time was how do I play in my drums, and how do I make my drums sound good, right? Because there's, a lot of times, I guess maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago when I was working in Logic, they didn't have this feature where you could just drag a set of samples in, or it wasn't as easy to just drag a set of samples in, and it would slice and chop it up into drum samples for you. And that made my workflow so much easier, because with most of my stuff, I'm on the piano. So I just want to be able to have this all laid out in front of me so that I could use it. And so, something that was really crucial to me was like learning how to work with drums. It's like, it's the most frustrating thing when you can hear the rhythm in your head and cannot replicate it, or know that this is supposed to be a bit more groovy, but that idea of groovy can't translate into drums. And so
how exactly.
Yeah, like how does that work? And so with a lot of this, learning a lot of these things, really the main way that I got used to using my software, like using Logic and stuff like that, and being able to fiddle around on the piano and get all my sounds up was just experiment, make bad stuff, YouTube tutorials, and like being a fan of other musicians' processes and just watching them. I mean, Jacob Collier has these really, really long 1.5, 2 hour breakdowns of his songs where he just goes into it and just says, okay, like this is what I wanted here, this is what I did here. And then he worked in Logic as well. So, one thing that I've picked up recently is this, in Logic, you can slow down the entire track, your entire project by, a certain amount of, by a certain speed, and it'll also slow down match the pitch accordingly. So it's like a slightly lower, slightly above. And so that's that little thing that might give the finishing touch to a project that, oh my gosh, it sounds a little bit too light, I want it to be heavier, and then you pitch it down maybe half a semitone and it's slower and it'll be more mellow. And I've been starting to work into taking a lot of these things that really great musicians are able to do and use as tools to produce with and apply them to the context of my music. And so I think that along with experimenting, there was two things that really did it for me. It's experimenting and just being a fan. Once you're a fan of things, you are just so avid and like just so willing to be able to dive into things.
Yeah.
And I think it supports that experimentation because it's like knowing that there's so many ways to go, and sometimes that might be overwhelming, but if you start with a few and just try to work through them, it'll come through. Like I really sometimes I look at my old projects and I like scoff and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? But I think it's nice to see the growth.
Yeah.
That's happened.
That's
right?
nice.
Yeah.
That is so nice. Like when I go through like my Visco, which is basically like my graphic design portfolio at this point because I'm too lazy to put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
I've just been doing it for so long. So I'll go back and it's like, this is something I published for the public and I don't even like looking at it anymore. It's like, I thought it was that good when I was like, I don't know, 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's crazy that I've evolved to a point where I think like it shouldn't even be seen by anyone. So I'll like delete it. Right. And that's a good feeling for me.
Right.
Not like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. But it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I got here. Mm-hmm. It's so nice. We were also talking about earlier the necessity for like creatives to kind of band around each other and just like network, and how you want to surround yourselves with people who are driven and creative and all those things and kind of be an asset for them.
Right. And
hope like, you like build off of each other as everyone's trying to learn.
Right.
Especially young creatives like us. How did that kind of like become so important to you? There was like this moment of clarity, and like how many people have you worked with so far?
Right. I think this sort of idea sort of manifested for me, the idea that you should surround yourself by people who love the same things you do. That idea sort of manifested when I think my sister's boyfriend was talking to me, and he was saying how a lot of the stuff he does, he's motivated by, he's proactive to find the people that he enjoys, enjoys being with, enjoys talking to about similar things. And I think he was talking about this in reference to a like discussion club where they would talk about a lot of people from very diverse backgrounds would talk about, very difficult topics like religion and, like introducing lots of things that just can be very controversial, contradictory for a lot of people because it comes down to their beliefs. And, with that, he said that he surrounded himself by a lot of people who were passionate about just discussion and about, sharing their own perspectives and narratives. And so I think that I was sort of inspired by that and thinking like, whoa, I'm just but one story, one musical journey, one creative, arc going along my way. If I work with people, surround myself by people that are able to do the same and are able to grow and create as they grow and, grow as they create, I think that makes the depth of the music and the understanding of the music so much more. I mean, like even since you've arrived, I've been listening to more rock, more indie. Sometimes I really don't dive into that enough, and hearing some of that music has just like sort of made me think, okay, what are the possibilities and stuff that I can make? You know, it's some of these little things that just sort of contribute. Sometimes don't even reach the, you know, the conscious. It's just like subconsciously you realize that you're taking more influences from different places and stuff like that. I recently worked with with one of my friends who's a really good electric guitarist, and he's just like really just so talented, and I think he's self-taught too. And it's just so amazing to see that he's self-taught, but is also very very sharp when it comes to music theory and things like that. And of course, a very talented electric guitar player. And when I work with him, sometimes I'm just sitting there watching him play, because even that just widens my perspective on what's possible. Because as much as I want to be in a smooth workflow, I also want to challenge myself and say, okay, whoa, this is an insane electric guitar sound, and he's playing these crazy chords. How do I integrate that into my workflow, which is more so like, okay, I put something down, play something into the piano, maybe start with a set of drums on occasion, and then create my song from there. How do I work with someone who just provides something so unique, and with an instrumentation and instruments that I would only dream of being able to play so well. And so by surrounding myself with these people, I just feel like my music has less like limits, because it just becomes this thing that slowly morphs and grows over time, like the creative possibilities. And so when I work with people and when I surround myself by those people, I think I'm just like I feel like even more pushed to make music and to share music and to appreciate music, because I feel like I'm also very driven by the way that people by other people, because it's there's only so much you can do. Like you said, in the film industry, you can only go so far by yourself. And so I do want to lean and support others, as well as lean on others to just slowly build up my music like understanding just through so many different perspectives.
Right.
And I think that's what it is for me.
Do you think collaborating has made you learn more about yourself?
Definitely. I mean, collaborating is so vulnerable. I remember working with a vocalist, his name's Sai, about maybe a month ago, and I was like it was very hard for me, but I had to be very upfront with him and say, hey, look, I usually am the type of person to go with anything, but I'm going to try and put my foot down when I can if I don't think that, this is where the music takes me. Like sort of you're saying, Tyler, the creator, is very insistent about this is how it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And that's really good, because you need that honesty in the studio in order to make something that both represents your voice and is a, is a collection and is something coherent that, other people will resonate with. And so, it's so difficult sometimes to be like, oh, how do you think this is? And my initial instinct is like, when someone asks like, oh, how do I look? And you're like, oh yeah, your outfit looks nice. Maybe it doesn't, but like the instant reaction, it's like, how are you? I'm good, right? I get that too much. I feel like I do that too much, where it's like, I want to reply with positivity, whereas sometimes, the best way to go is honesty. And I really learned so much from this. And that's why I really do want to work with people as well, is because you need to really center yourself and say, okay, ego aside, we want to make good music.
Of course.
And that's the baseline. We want to make something that that people will enjoy, that people are going to appreciate as much as we will appreciate it, and as we make it, that we're going to appreciate this process. So I think that it's really helped me learn that I need to be more open, but also be more insistent about the things I think about, and be really in charge of that, because sometimes I let that slide, and the musical voice is so important to any piece of music, and like just to have that creativity and to be able to share it and to be able to say, okay, this is what needs to be done, this is what I feel like needs to be done, is super important, because it's all about the back and forth. So yeah, definitely learned. That's one big thing that I've noticed and learned from working with people and collaborating.
Absolutely. You mentioned Tyler, and like an enlightening moment of just like observing other people's creative processes was with Tyler in the studio. He like recorded this for his Cherry Bomb documentary. He was in the studio with his like lifelong mentor and like creative influence, Pharrell Williams, and they were just arguing. Like I think that was the only clip that Pharrell Williams was actually in the documentary because he collaborated on that album, and they were just arguing about like, is what we're about to record even worth it? Like basically.
Wow. Yeah.
And they're just kind of going at it in a respectful manner, but still like very blunt. And then also another time I was just watching like this video about various celebrities talking about Tyler the Creator. I was just like curious, like, oh, what do they have to say? And Jaden Smith also kind of looks up to Tyler the Creator as a mentor.
Right.
And on his album, like, which was pretty big and like commercially like successful, it was like his second to last one. He asked Tyler, yo, like, what do you think? And he's like, I didn't like it. Like straight up, Tyler said that. And he was like, great, like come to the studio and mentor me into like make me better. Like the fact not only that Tyler to a young creator was like straight up I don't like it, but then also that Jaden as a young creative put his ego aside and just wanted to be better and was so receptive to that criticism. Like that was very enlightening to me, and like especially as like a filmmaker, it's so hard to put that ego aside sometimes. Right. Like I've seen it like so many times where people like they like obviously you want to put your foot down because you want to like keep the inspiration alive for what you even had like the initial idea for. Like if you have that inspiration, you want to just protect it at all costs. I get that, but sometimes you just have to put it aside and really collaborate to make something that like is like universally just like I don't know, like coherent.
Yeah, and resonates with people.
Resonates with people. Like everything you want a film or even a piece of music to be, just like bare minimum, people can understand it and like take it in as like just as art.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
And so yeah, I think that's great that you mentioned that.
Right.
Also, I feel like you also do that a lot in a indirect way. Just by example, like going to the jazz scene here in St. Louis, just like sitting there and taking it all in.
Right.
Like it's a very indirect form of collaboration. They're playing their music for you to get better, but also you're taking it in as a musician. Like, wow, this is like where music can take people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like applying it in your own ways. Since being in St. Louis, like has that been like a big thing for you? Is there other things you do that with?
Right. I think that, you know, there's this jazz jam that happens Wednesdays every week, and it's been something that's become a habit for me to go and watch and listen because you know, jazz is such a phenomenal thing that there are no wrong answers. It's like that's lovely. No wrong answers. Like school doesn't teach you that, right? So, and you know, that's why, a side note, like people doing art for school is just like, wow, that's amazing, because the fact that you're getting critiqued on stuff that's so subjective is like insane to me. But you know, with jazz, there's no wrong answers, and to me, I think it's crazy because you can break it down and say, okay, here's the sort of chord ideas, here's what the you know, he did this voice leading which caused this to sound really good, and then there's just sitting there and just hearing it, and there's just being in awe. Like it's not even it's I wouldn't even say it's passive, but it's just so it just takes you in that you don't even have to analyze or do anything. Yeah, that you just feel it, you know? And I think that's something that's really important about I think of recent, because I've just started this just started going to these regularly, you know, just this summer about a month ago, and I've realized that, you know, Jacob Collier says this too, that, you know, music is what you make of it, and just so much like you can take this piece of music that some people might say is amazing, some people might criticize. And for some jazz musicians, like I'll go and watch them, and you know, these young kids too, like high schoolers, amazing artists, so like, you know, so emotionally and artistically mature already, and they could be the most talented person and just not have a good solo that one day or that one song even. And you know, the next song they kill it. And it's just, I think it's nice to see that also, I guess, that form of vulnerability too. And so, you know, in the indirect form of collaboration, I'm learning from them sort of how impressive it is to just go up there and just create something that on the spot is how you feel, how you want, what you want to manifest into the world. And it's so amazing to me. And so I think it's actually really awesome because St. Louis actually has a decent music scene. Like jazz is big here. I went to a little like dinnery place where they had live music with blues, some rock and all this sorts of stuff. And I think there are really lots of avenues to just explore and just be a fan, and in so many different ways. Because when I was playing trombone in high school, I would try doing little jazz improv solos. I wasn't too great, but this is a way where I can sort of digest that without having to be the most talented person ever. I can just appreciate.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of that's just become another way for me to expand my perspective and to be be a fan. I think that's all it comes down to, is like if you're a fan, you'll become inspired to do more with things.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, if that's mostly what it's been for me.
Have like those type of people who just like put it all out on stage, as like being that vulnerable to put their music like for everyone to see, like has that inspired you to want to like release more? Because like I've seen your like folders, like there's a lot of stuff stored up in there. Maybe like you're not ready for like the public consumption, but like surely there's got to be stuff that like you want to release.
Yeah.
And like, do you think it's just like there'll be a time for it, or are you just kind of mustering the courage, or do you just want to make, just keep adding the layers till you feel like it's good enough? Like,
right. I think for me, there has to be a certain point in time where I put my own foot down and say, hey, I know this is not 100%, but it's 95 and it's 96, and if you don't put it out, then it's just gonna exist. I think I do need to be more. I do want to put out more music, and a lot of these people have shown me what it's like to be courageous and to be vulnerable and to put these things out. And I think that now it just comes a time to put in the work, which is really, I feel like that's the part in like art that is really like maybe glossed over, or I hadn't realized as much in my mind when I was like, oh, I'm gonna make music, is that there's a whole process that goes through. There's the creating process, and then there's the I can be a little bit more critical of my work now that it's finished and I've got it in a good form, and how do I tweak it and make little edits, turn up the highs here, add a little bit more reverb here, volume up and down, make sure my leveling is all good. And so all of these things are, I would say, more so, because it comes after the creative process, more so work than it is creating. Not in a bad way, because I appreciate this kind of work and I actually love it. I just need to put in more time and more effort, because it seems less gratifying, because it's like, oh, I haven't made something new, but I'm improving on something. And so something that I've realized is that if you think about the bottleneck of my creative process, it's like I always want to create. I want to make stuff, and then this this ongoing to-do list folder, whatever it is just going on and on. And I realized that this is actually funny, because this is actually a concept that I was coming through in work, is that if you have a bunch of in progress things, it's never gonna be successful to have a bunch of things in progress and complete nothing, right? For some people, maybe it's just like once they have one good thing, they work on it and work on it and work on it, and that's also not useful, because you just have one specific song that's like you've been attached to, and but for me, it's like I've created so much, and now I need to take that time and put in that hard work to make it, to polish it, to put all the get the shoe shine on, do that stuff, so that I can put it out. And I think that once I do that, and once I get in a good workflow of that, I will start releasing things. I think now a lot of my songs are at the 60 to 80% threshold, where they could be 90 plus in terms of completion and in terms of how I feel about it and wanting to release it. And so I think it's now the question is, can you put in the work that's required, right? Because it's so easy to make, because you have no it's no strings attached, right? It exists in your folder. But once you put it out, then it's like, oh my gosh, this is living forever. So for me, it's like, let's put in those final touches, and then I have to muster up that courage, be vulnerable, put it out, and I know that that's the work that I want out, And I think once I put in that work, the releases, I'll get more songs out. I'll get all of these things out. You know what I mean?
In high school, senior year actually, I had enough like stored up over the summer of like graphic design work, artwork, that was just like kind of being stored. And then like on my own personal Instagram, I like posted like a couple things for people to see.
Right.
And that was like the most like anxious I feel like I had almost ever been. Like top 3 like biggest like I could barely sleep. I think I woke up like 5 times in the middle of the night just thinking about like what are people going to say when they see this in the morning.
Right.
Literally like, but I felt like it was so necessary, and like that I developed this concept that from there on out that like the creative process isn't finished until it's released.
Yeah.
Like you can store it up and keep it on your own forever, but like that creative process is still going because you'll always be able to say like, well, I can always go back and fix it.
Right.
Right. Until it's out there and it can't necessarily like be fixed anymore. Mm-hmm. There's never going to be a point like where you can say like you're finished.
That's true. Yeah.
And so like that was very important for me to learn young, because like going into college with the podcast and then Babellion Studios, it's like, like we could have just been doing this for fun, but it's the fact that we actually started releasing stuff that just made it seem so gratifying and complete.
Right.
And you just kind of have to like face that fear and also like have no regrets about it and just know that there's nowhere else but up,
Right.
Like you're not going to like get worse talent wise or skill wise, and so like things will always get better. So don't I guess like don't feel like things are gonna like not go your way. Like maybe it won't be instantly gratifying, but it will.
Right, exactly.
But you have to put it out. Also, I had another question, because like with St. Louis and jazz and blues and stuff like that has like affected and influenced you. Are there other environments that you've immersed yourself in across the globe, since you are a worldly person, that you think has like inspired you musically or just like in life in general?
Right. It's actually really interesting, because something that I realized is a lot of the influences I think that I've had are sort of, they ebb and flow, and they come in different ways. More like it's hard to track down, but something that I realize is that my music is directly how I make music. I think is very much related to the width and breadth of music that I listen to. Mm-hmm. And like, for example, I mean, I had a lot of Korean friends growing up, and so they introduced me a lot to Korean R&B, which is, I think I actually really resonate with, because it has the sort of instrumentation and like really, really musical complexity of R&B that exists, in the US and Western R&B. I don't even know if that's what it is, but there's really, really complex musical chords going on. I mean, I think of one song which was popular in Korea, which was Soulmate by Zico, and remind me, we gotta listen to that later.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was my favorite song for the longest time, and it was because there was, they had they had some jazzy trumpet solo come in, they had, complex chords behind, but at the same time they were driving a lot of like synthy sounds and like very electronic sounds. And it's like such a unique blend of like electronic, hip hop, R&B music that is so unique. And I don't know how like Korean like music sort of coalesced and like got to have such like really, really talented producers. If you want to look them up, like Groovy Room, Zico, like there are so many different people. I mean, just it's so interesting to see this melding of worlds that's like happening across the world in a different continent, right? And I think it's really cool, because I think that, now that you asked me that question, I realized that a lot of the style that I'm trying to work on is sort of those unique synthy electronic sounds that I can make on Logic and in my little plugins and stuff like that. and then still having a really natural feel to it, you know, and still be able to include a trumpet solo like Soulmate does, and it feel natural. And I think there's this really cool, they really make these songs that are both accessible and musically complex. You know, sometimes, you know, a jazz solo might be like, a musician might go crazy over it, you know? Like there's this one solo, jazz solo, Lingus by Snarky Puppy, and Corey Henry, this crazy organ player, just goes like insane. And to this day, I try and rewatch it, you know, after extended periods of time, months, years, or whatever, and be like, okay, how much do I pick up? And, you know, I looked at it after a year, and I listened to it again, and I was like, I didn't pick up that much. And, you know, it's because it's just like, this is a crazy level that they're at.
I actually watched that recently. Like, that shit is crazy.
Right, exactly. And it's like the appreciation for it. What I think that like the Korean R&B music, for one example of like one of the music influences that I've had in terms of genre, like they really balance that. It's like, whoa, this can be crazy. This can also be very, very accessible, very poppy, very popular, very can touch a lot of people in a very like vibey way. But it's also just, you know, musically complex. So it's like a lot of stuff.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you, Quinn Wai. Thanks to you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say about, like, I don't know, like, just things you want the world to know about where to find you, maybe, what to look out for?
I feel like for some people, like, at the end of these interviews, like the popular people, they like they're like, oh, my album's coming out,
right?
You know,
Yeah.
my new thing is coming out. I mean, just stay tuned. I have a SoundCloud. It's Quinn Wai Wong. If you search it up, my artist name is Bao, B-A-O. But you know, like, honestly, I just want to tell people to like be fans of music. You can be fans of music in all sorts of ways. And I don't know. If music, or maybe if music is not your thing, just be a fan of the things that of the things you love, and find people, surround yourself by people who also love those passions.
There you go. That's a great note to end on. Yeah. Thank you so much again. Thank you for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great day.